What up, y'all? It's Hoops, and today we're going to be talking some more about Pokemon Legends ZA. I know I've been talking a lot about it lately, obviously it's super hype, but today, to change things up a bit, we're going to be talking about a different sort of topic, and that is hints to Pokemon Legends ZA from before its reveal in older Pokemon games. Hints to new games and older games is a pretty consistent, regular thing in Pokemon, and it's always fun to look back on them after the fact and find the hints that were there that we had no idea about at the time, and that's what we're going to be looking at in today's video. This is going to be a super fun one. There's a lot of cool things to look at, so let's go ahead and get to it. So the first major hints to Legend ZA come from the game that is preceding it, Scarlet and Violet. So we're going to start there, but going back even further than Scarlet and Violet is the sponsor of today's video, Ridge Wallet. I checked the calendar and I have been using a Ridge wallet for about 4 years now, and I can genuinely say that it changed my life. I've always been enthusiastic about Ridge whenever they sponsored the channel because their products are just that good. Like, I was not required to use a Ridge wallet for 4 years when they first sponsored the channel, but I chose to because it was just that much better than the previous wallet experience that I had had to that point. And these wallets are infinitely better than any standard wallet that you are ever going to find. And honestly, I don't want to be dramatic here, but even if it is just in the wallet part of my life, I can definitely say that Ridge wallets have elevated my standard of living a little bit because they're just one of those products that you can tell are just better when you get it in your hands. And when you do get it in your hands, you're like, whoa. Ridge is also currently having an 11-year anniversary sale where you can score up to 30% off with the link in the description, ridge.com/hoops. It also supports the channel when you do, so it helps to keep the videos coming, and honestly, I'm telling you guys, Ridge wallets are next level, so do yourself a favor, check them out with that link in the description below, and a big thank you as always to Ridge for supporting the channel. So as I was saying, we're going to begin things here with the games that are preceding Pokemon Legends ZA, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And to start us off, we are going to be talking about the signature move of the Eternal Flower Floette, Light of Ruin, and its presence in Scarlet and Violet. So as you may know, the Eternal Flower Floette was originally going to be an obtainable Pokemon at one point, and even had its own signature move, which was known as Light of Ruin. However, Floette, and therefore this move, never got distributed, it was never made available, and therefore, it basically just got lost to time within the unused data of all the Pokemon games since Gen 6. Light of Ruin even had its own description that was written out, but obviously was never used, and therefore, this description remained unused in each subsequent Pokemon game since X and Y, and remained unchanged until Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which updated the description of this move. And that caught a lot of people's attention, including my own at the time, because it's like, why change this now? Why are you paying attention to it now and updating it, and for what purpose? Well, while we thought it was interesting at the time, we obviously didn't really know where it was going to lead, but now we definitely know for certain that this was obviously in some sort of preparation for Legends ZA, which makes it all the more possible, as if it wasn't already pretty much a foregone conclusion anyway, that the Eternal Flower Floette is going to appear in this game. It's going to finally get a chance to use its signature move, Light of Ruin, and in all likelihood, we are finally going to get the chance to obtain it. Another one from Scarlet and Violet that I've also discussed before is the mystery area of the Paldea region map. If you look at Paldea's map within the game, there's an area within the northeastern corner of the map, just outside of Paldea's borders, that's very distinctively sort of mapped off as an area of its own, and it's done so very specifically and very intentionally, to the point where Game Freak obviously intended to do this. However, it's not a place we can access, and it's not a place that is mentioned or alluded to in any way in the game. And the reason why this is so interesting is because, number one, like I said, this area was very specifically and intentionally put onto the map. It's not like this was an accident that it's there. This area was sort of mapped off for a reason, even if we don't know what that reason is. The second reason is because if we equate Paldea's inspiration, which is Spain and the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, and equate Kalos with its inspiration from X and Y, which is obviously France, those two countries are right next to each other, and France, aka Kalos, lies to the northeast of Spain, aka Paldea. So this area that is on the map is exactly where Kalos would be in the Pokemon world, assuming the real world locations line up to the Pokemon ones. And even though we still don't have any idea about what this area entails, or if it's going to get used, or anything like that, with the reveal of Pokemon Legends ZA and the fact that we're returning to Kalos, we can definitely say at the very least that this was done with Legends ZA in mind. So it was definitely a bit of foreshadowing and sort of teasing at what was to come. Another one that is a super obvious connection, knowing what we know now, is the presence of Roaring Moon and Iron Valiant. These two Paradox Pokemon are special in the Paradox Pokemon category because not only do they resemble Pokemon from the modern day, they actually resemble the Mega Evolutions of the Pokemon that they are supposed to resemble. Mega Evolution itself is even alluded to in one of Roaring Moon's Pokedex entries, so there is a huge sort of acknowledgement of Mega Evolution going on here, which certainly piqued our interest at the time when Scarlet and Violet first released, but now we know that it's taking on some greater significance and was obviously a connection at Legends ZA, which was not too far in the future following Scarlet and Violet's release. And while this definitely is a hint, teasing, foreshadowing, whatever you want to call it, it also begs the question of whether or not the Paradox Pokemon, these two in particular, could have any kind of significance in Legends ZA, since obviously there's some connective tissue here between these two games, and Legends ZA is going to be set within the Generation 9 timeframe, where Paradox Pokemon are obviously front and center, so that will be something that we'll definitely want to keep an eye on as well. And another reason why that is because of the Eternal Flower Floette. This is sort of a two-pronged point that encompasses both the Eternal Flower Floette and its trainer, AZ. A lot of people were sort of making conspiracy theory type of connections between AZ and Area Zero, since the initials of Area Zero are AZ. And then when you bring in Eternal Flower Floette as a part of this equation, it very, very closely resembling, almost identically resembling, in fact, the Paradox Pokemon, not only in terms of design and makeup, but also stats as well, really got some people scratching their heads because the similarities were there, but we couldn't possibly fathom how this would connect to Kalos, or that we would even remotely have a chance to return to Kalos at this time. Well, now that we are in fact returning to Kalos in Legends ZA, it really starts to legitimize all of these connections which once seemed crazy. I honestly do not know if there is actually going to be a connection between AZ and Area Zero. That could just be a coincidence, or at the very most a tease if anything, but I definitely feel like there's a connection between Area Zero and the Paradox Pokemon and the Eternal Flower Floette. I feel like there is a pretty solid likelihood that the Eternal Flower Floette will get confirmed in some way as a Paradox Pokemon, because it's almost identical to a Paradox Pokemon, like I said, right down to its stats, which are very much in the same range as the other Paradox Pokemon. So I feel like this is sort of the direction they're trying to take with Floette in terms of explaining what it is, now that it will likely have a greater storyline in Legends ZA, which ultimately makes Area Zero and the Paradox Pokemon and these apparent connections that Area Zero in particular seems to have with AZ not only legitimate, but also sort of a setup and once again a bit of foreshadowing to the overall plot line of this whole Paradox Pokemon arc within Generation 9 and going into Legends ZA in particular. Now we've got to talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus though, because if there was ever a game that was going to connect to Legends ZA, it would be the other Legends game in Legends Arceus. And one connection that makes it kind of seem like they had these games planned as sort of a tandem all along is the fact that if you choose the male player character, Ray, at the very beginning of the game when he gets sucked into the past, he is wearing a t-shirt that is from the Kalos region and can be worn by the player character in Pokemon X and Y. This is not a new fact, this is something that was picked up almost immediately upon Legends Arceus' release, but now obviously knowing that we're returning to Kalos in a Legends game, it takes on a greater bit of significance, and it makes you wonder if maybe they sort of had a Kalos Legends game planned even all the way back then when they were building the first Legends game. And the reason why this could be a legitimate piece of foreshadowing or teasing is because it's not the only thing in Legends Arceus that ties to Legends ZA. In fact, this next thing I would say is probably a definite connection between the two. Courtesy of Twitter user Matt Ukana, who does data mining for lots of Pokemon games, at the time of Legends Arceus' release, he was doing some data mining of Legends Arceus and discovered that there is information relating to Mega Evolution within the data of this game. Matt goes on to say that even the cries of Mega Evolutions can be found within the game's sound data. And like I said, this was discovered all the way back when Legends Arceus first released, and it certainly caused some buzz at the time, but was pretty much just left at that. However, once again, now that we know that we're getting another Legends game and it's set in the Kalos region and is specifically featuring the return of Mega Evolution, it's hard to believe that the inclusion of this Mega Evolution data in Legends Arceus, when it wasn't in other games like Sword and Shield at the time, was just a coincidence or an accident. It definitely seems like Game Freak was preparing for something, and that this was ultimately a sign that we were also going to be getting Legends ZA a few years later. Okay, so moving along, this next one is really interesting because it's not actually something that is directly present within the games, but when you look at it, you can definitely look at it and say that, yeah, this is something we should have been paying attention to, and this was ultimately a hint, if we would have noticed it at the time, that Legends ZA was going to be coming. So a lot of people, including myself, were noting that this year, 2024, is the year of the dragon within the Chinese zodiac, and we were using that as sort of a hint or a piece of evidence that Unova could potentially be revisited this year with the new game, since Unova is obviously all about its dragons and the original Unova dragon in particular. That ultimately didn't happen, obviously, but it seems like we might have been on the right track, because with Legends ZA coming out in 2025, and obviously focusing on Zygarde, it's very, very interesting that 2025 just so happens to be the year of the snake, which doesn't seem like it's a coincidence, especially when you consider that this year, once again being the year of the dragon, and the year that Legends ZA was announced, basically makes the last 2 years the year of the dragon and the year of the snake, which is exactly what Zygarde is a dragon-type snake Pokemon. So it seems like this is something that Game Freak might have been considering when putting together this whole plan for this game and doing it within this year, and it seems like we were also on the right track in terms of looking at the Chinese zodiac. The ultimate hint to all of this was just apparently a year farther out than we were all initially thinking. Getting back into the games though, a clear indication that something Kalos related was coming, even if we didn't really acknowledge or notice at the time, since the game was such a big surprise, is the absence of the Aura Trio, Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. In the Indigo Disc DLC for Scarlet and Violet, they added in a ton of obtainable legendary Pokemon, but one of the very few that aren't obtainable or were not added in the Indigo Disc in particular are Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. Knowing what we know now, this was obviously done with Legends ZA in mind, and the absence of these Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet is directly because they are going to be present in Legends ZA, and that is where we're going to have to obtain them within this generation. Looking back on it, it's kind of obvious that that should have been an indicator that something was going on, but we were just all hyperfixated on Johto and Unova that we just didn't even notice, really. That is pretty much going to do it for me, though, in this video, so thank you guys so much for watching. Please now go down to the comments and let me know all of your thoughts about all this stuff, because I would love to hear it, and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more. And as always, if you would like to support the channel further, which would be greatly appreciated, you can also check out my Pokemon remixes over on Spotify or wherever you get your music. It greatly supports the channel right back here and is very much appreciated. With that said, I will be back very soon with another new video, and until then, as always, thanks again for watching this one. I really, really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.